Hey, what's up, everybody? It's Mr. Sanders Twin again, and we are so back. Now, I might be jumping the gun a little bit. It's only December 29th. I even have my Christmas tree still up right here, and um, we even got Santa Claus on my Diet Coke can. So, in spite of all that, I'm just so excited to begin the next book, Just Mercy. So, we're going to go ahead and jump right into the introduction. Let's go ahead and begin. Introduction. Higher ground. I wasn't prepared to meet a condemned man. In 1983, I was a 23-year-old Harvard Law School student working at an internship in Georgia, eager and worried that I was in over my head. I had never seen the inside of a maximum security prison, and had certainly never been to death row. Georgia's death row is in a prison outside of Jackson, a remote rural town. I drove there by myself, my heart pounding harder the closer I got. I was convinced that this man was going to be very disappointed to see me. I didn't really know anything about capital punishment and hadn't even taken a class in criminal procedure yet. I didn't have a basic grasp of the complex appeals process that shaped death penalty litigation, a process that would in time become as familiar to me as the back of my hand. I studied philosophy in college and didn't realize until my senior year that no one would pay me to philosophize when I graduated. I was uncertain about what I wanted to do with my life, but I knew it would have something to do with the lives of the poor, America's history of racial inequality, and the struggle to be just and fair with one another. I found two programs that seemed like the right fit. At Harvard, I could study law while also pursuing a graduate degree in public policy at the Kennedy School of Government. Not long after classes began, I started to worry I'd made the wrong choice. I felt less experienced than my peers. I had never even met a lawyer before starting law school. I felt very fortunate to have been admitted, but by the end of my first year, I'd grown disenchanted. Harvard Law School was a pretty intimidating place, and the courses seemed disconnected from the race and poverty issues that had motivated me to study the law in the first place. While my classmates put on expensive suits and interviewed at firms in New York, Los Angeles, or Washington, D.C., I spent the summer after my first year in law school working with a juvenile justice project in Philadelphia and taking advanced calculus courses at night to prepare for my next year at the Kennedy School. The public policy program's curriculum was extremely numbers and statistics focused, leaving me feeling adrift. Then suddenly, everything came into focus. I discovered that the law school offered a 1 month intensive course on race and poverty litigation taught by Betsy Bartholet, who had worked as an attorney with the NAACP Legal Defense Fund. Students were required to spend the month with an organization doing social justice work. So, in December 1983, I found myself on a plane to Atlanta, Georgia, where I was scheduled to spend a few weeks working with the Southern Prisoners Defense Committee, SPDC, now known as the Southern Defense for Human Rights, or SCHR. Their mission? To defend condemned people on death row in Georgia. All right, we're going to go ahead and answer that first question. What kind of work is Brian doing in Georgia? You'll find a very clear answer to this question at the end of this paragraph. Their mission, meaning the organization's mission, to defend condemned people on death row in Georgia. And remember to put this in your own words as well. If you need a sentence starter, you can use Brian is working on blank. All right, let's go ahead and continue. I met Steve Bright, the director of the SPDC, on my flight down. Steve was a brilliant trial lawyer in his mid 30s. He'd grown up on a farm in Kentucky, ended up in Washington, D.C. at the Public Defender Service, and had just been recruited to take over the SPDC. Unlike so many of my law professors, there was no disconnect between what he did and what he believed in. When we met, he warmly wrapped me in a full body hug, and then we started talking. We didn't stop till we reached Atlanta. Brian, he said at some point during our short flight, capital punishment means them without the capital get the punishment. We can't help people on death row without help from people like you. I processed what he meant. People without money or capital were the ones who were punished. I was taken aback by his immediate belief that I had something to offer. He broke down the issues with the death penalty simply but persuasively, and I hung on every word, completely engaged by his dedication and charisma. It was deeply affirming to meet someone whose work so powerfully animated his life. All right, so we have another question already. That is, what does Steve Bright mean by defining capital punishment as them without the capital get the punishment? I trust that Mr. Sanders is going to break this down for you, so I'm just going to go ahead and show you where you can find details that can help you answer this. You might want to look in this paragraph. I processed what he meant. People without money or capital were the ones who were punished. If you need a sentence starter, you can use he means that blank. All right, let's go ahead and continue. I just hope you're not expecting anything too fancy while you're here, he said. Oh no, I assured him. I'm grateful for the opportunity to work with you. Well, we live kind of simply, and the hours are pretty intense, he warned. I quickly realized he wasn't kidding. There were just a few attorneys working at the SPDC when I arrived that winter. In their 30s, men and women, black and white, these lawyers were prepared to fight for the rights of the condemned and those facing unjust treatments in jails and prisons. After years of prohibition and delay, executions were again taking place in the Deep South. Most of SPDC's lawyers had come to Georgia in response to a growing crisis. Death row prisoners couldn't get lawyers and were being denied their right to receive counsel for legal advice. There was a growing fear that people would be killed without ever having their cases reviewed by skilled counsel. Every day, we got frantic calls from people who had no legal assistance, but whose execution dates were on the calendar and approaching fast. I'd never heard voices so desperate. When I started my internship, everyone was extremely kind to me, and I felt immediately at home. I did clerical work, answering phones and researching legal questions for staff. I was just getting settled into my routine when Steve asked me to go to death row to meet with a condemned man who had been there for more than 2 years. My job was to convey to him one simple message: you will not be killed in the next year. Driving through farmland in rural Georgia, I rehearsed what I would say when I met this man. Hello, my name is Brian. I'm a student with the. No. I'm a law student with. No. My name is Brian Stevenson. I'm a legal intern with the Southern Prisoners Defense Committee, and I've been instructed to inform you that you will not be executed soon. You can't be executed soon. You are not at risk of execution anytime soon. No. Soon I found myself pulling up to the intimidating barbed wire fence and white guard tower of the Georgia Diagnostic and Classification State Prison, or as we called it at SBDC, Jackson. This was a hard place. When I told the visitation officer that I was a paralegal sent to meet with a death row prisoner, he looked at me suspiciously. I waited until he brusquely directed me to the small room where the visit would take place. Don't get lost in here. We don't promise to come find you, he warned. The visitation room was an empty metal cage. It was small, and although I knew it couldn't be true, It felt like it was getting smaller by the second. I began worrying again about my lack of preparation. I'd scheduled to meet with the client for 1 hour, but how would I fill all that time? I sat down on one of the stools that were bolted to the floor and waited anxiously. Finally, I heard the clanging of chains on the other side of the door. The man who walked in seemed even more nervous than I was. He glanced at me, his face screwed up in a worried wince. He was a young, neatly groomed African American man with short hair, clean shaven, medium frame and build, wearing bright, clean prison whites. He looked immediately familiar to me, like everyone I'd grown up with, friends from school, people I played sports or music with. The guard removed his handcuffs and the shackles around his ankles, and then locked eyes with me and told me I had 1 hour. The officer seemed to take pleasure in our discomfort, grinning at me before turning on his heel and leaving the room. The metal door banged loudly behind him. The condemned man didn't come any closer, and I didn't know what else to do, so I walked over and offered him my hand. He shook it cautiously. We sat down and he spoke first. "I'm Henry," he said. "I'm very sorry," were the first words I blurted out. Despite all my preparations and rehearsed remarks, I couldn't stop myself from apologizing repeatedly. "I'm really sorry. I'm really sorry. Okay, I don't really know. I'm just a law student, not a real lawyer. I'm so sorry I can't tell you very much, but I don't know very much." The man looked at me worriedly. "Is everything all right with my case?" "Oh, yes, sir. The lawyers at SBDC sent me down to tell you that they don't have a lawyer yet, but you're not at risk of execution any time in the next year. We're working on finding you a lawyer, a real lawyer, and we hope the lawyer will be down to see you in the next few months. I'm just a law student. I'm really happy to help. I mean, if there's something I can do." The man interrupted my chatter by quickly grabbing my hands. "I'm not going to have an execution date any time in the next year?" "No, sir. They said it would be at least a year before you get an execution date." Those words didn't sound very comforting to me, but Henry just squeezed my hands tighter and tighter. "Thank you, man. I mean, really, thank you. This is great news." His shoulders relaxed, and he looked at me with intense relief in his eyes. "You are the first person I've met in over 2 years after coming to death row who is not another death row prisoner or a death row guard. I'm so glad you're here. I'm so glad to get this news." He exhaled loudly. "I've been talking to my wife on the phone, but I haven't wanted her to come and visit me or bring the kids because I was afraid they show up and I'd have an execution date. I just don't want them here like that. Now I'm going to tell them that they can come and visit. Thank you." All right, we're going to answer the next question. How does Henry respond to the news about his execution date? There's a lot of details about his response, but here's a couple of details you might want to focus on. "Thank you, man. I mean, really, thank you. This is great news." His shoulders relaxed and he looked at me with intense relief in his eyes. And then he also says, "I'm so glad you're here and I'm so glad to get this news." Oh, and if you need a sentence starter, you can use "he responds by blank." All right, so we're going to go ahead and finish up this read aloud. We're not going to finish the introduction. We're going to do a part 2 of the introduction. We just got one more question for this read aloud. "I was astonished that he was so happy. I relaxed too, and soon we were both lost in conversation. He told me about his trial. I answered his questions about law school. We talked about our families, about music, about prison. We talked about what's important in life and what's not. We laughed at times, and there were moments when he was very emotional and sad. We kept talking and talking, and it was only when I heard a loud bang on the door that I realized I'd stayed way past my allotted time for the legal visit. I looked at my watch. I'd been there 3 hours. The guard came in. He snarled at me. "You should have been done a long time ago. You need to leave." He pulled Henry's hands together behind his back and locked them in handcuffs. Then he roughly shackled Henry's ankles. I could see Henry grimacing with pain. I said, I think those cuffs are on too tight. Can you loosen them, please? You don't tell me how to do my job. Henry gave me a smile and said, It's okay, Brian. Don't worry about this. Just come back and see me again, okay? I could see him wince with each click of the chains being tightened around his waist. Distraught, I mumbled, I'm really sorry. I'm really sorry. Don't worry about this, Brian, he said, cutting me off. Just come back. I wanted to say something reassuring, something that expressed my gratitude to him for being so patient with me and my nerves, but I couldn't think of anything. As the guard shoved him roughly towards the door, Henry looked back at me and smiled. Just before he could be pushed out the door, he planted his feet on the floor. Then he did something completely unexpected. He closed his eyes and tilted his head back. I was confused by what he was doing, but then, as he opened his mouth, I understood. He began to sing. He had a tremendous baritone voice that was strong and clear. It startled both me and the guard, who stopped his pushing. I'm not going to sing because I don't think I'm as good of a singer as Henry, so I'm just going to read the words. I'm pressing on the upward way. New heights I'm gaining every day. Still praying as I'm onward bound. Lord, plant my feet on higher ground. It was an old hymn they used to sing all the time in the church where I grew up. I hadn't heard it in years. Henry sang slowly and with great sincerity and conviction. Because his ankles were shackled and his hands were locked behind his back, Henry almost stumbled when the guard shoved him forward again, but he kept on singing down the hall. I finished my internship, committed to helping the death row prisoners I had met that month. Once I returned to law school, I felt an intense desire to understand the laws that permitted and sanctioned the death penalty and other extreme punishments. I piled up courses: constitutional law, litigation, appellate procedure, and federal courts. I plunged deeply into the history of race, poverty, and power. Both law school and my public policy degree had seemed abstract and disconnected before, but after meeting the desperate and imprisoned, they both became relevant and critically important. My short time on death row revealed that there was something skewed in the way our judicial system interprets the law. The more I reflected on the experience, the more I recognized that I had been struggling my whole life with the question of how and why some people are judged unfairly. All right, let's go ahead and answer that last question. What question has Brian been struggling with? You'll find that question in this part of the paragraph. The more I reflected on the experience, the more I recognized that I had been struggling my whole life with the question of how and why some people are judged unfairly. If you need a sentence starter, you can use the question he has been struggling with is blank. All right, everybody. Hope you got a good first impression of Just Mercy. And we are going to pick up the rest of the introduction the next time we meet. Till then, take care.